Namaskar dosto, once again welcome to Sporting Angels Educational Spectrum. It is English time. How are you my literary friends? And today I have taken up the poem Fog. A small but beautiful poem. I can assure you one thing, although it is a small poem, but you will enjoy reading each word of it. Before we read the poem, let's know something about the poet. The poet Carl Sandburg was an American poet. He was born at Galesburg in America on 6th January 1878. He could not complete his schooling. That's a very fascinating thing about him. The poet could not, he had to leave the school at the age, somewhere at 13 years of age. He could not study further because he could not pay for his education. But later on, he becomes such a fantastic poet. He wrote great poetry and he was unable to pay for the first book that was printed. For him, Professor Phillips paid. Later on, Munro joined him, and friends, he died in the year 1969. His main literary works, Comhuskas, Chicago Poems, and one of his very famous book is the biography about Abraham Lincoln. He wrote about Abraham Lincoln. That book became very famous. In fact, he got 3 Pulitzer Prizes also. 2 for poetry and 1 for the biography of Abraham Lincoln. Now, let's read the poem and enjoy it line by line. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent haunches and then moves on. This poem shows his true love for the nature and how he makes a comparison between the fog and the cat. Friends, although he makes a comparison between fog and the cat, making the cat very metaphoric, and yet this is true for the life of men also. See how a person takes birth, performs his lifetime duties, and without any notice goes from the world. So here the cat as well as the fog becomes symbolic. He uses cat and fog as symbolism to compare the life of men. Right? Friends, in the opening line, the poet here shows his interest in the nature, and one comes across how deeply he is involved with the nature when he says, the fog comes on little cat feet. See, the comparison is with the cat because the fog always comes without giving any prior notice. And this is how the cat comes. Nobody knows when it is coming and when it takes your milk away and when it goes off. Similar is the case with the fog. So it's a beautiful comparison. In the next two lines, the poet brings out the imagery with the use of metaphoric cat, right? When he says, it sits looking over harbor and city, as the cat overlaps everything when it does whatever it has come to do. Similar is the case with the fog. When it comes for a moment, for some time, it covers everything, the city as well as the harbor. And the visibility becomes almost nil. And then in the last two lines, he tells us about how silently both the fog as well as the cat leave the place. The fog goes without giving any notice, and that is what a cat does. In fact, with the symbolism of cat and fog, here the poet tells us about the end of our life. A person comes to the world, he performs all the duties, and then without giving any notice, goes nobody knows where. Similar is the case with the cat. You cannot find the cat. After it has done whatever it came to do, it goes because it sits on its haunches. When the poet says it sits on its haunches, here he means that it's very alert. And with the same alertness, it leaves the place without being noticed. And that is what the life is. Nobody could tell till now that when a person will go. All of a sudden you find people saying, "Arey, I saw him yesterday. Arey, kal hi to wo doodh lene mere saath aaye the. Arey, he was with me just 1 hour before and he has left the world." So very beautifully the poet here with the symbolism of cat and fog has given us a hint what a human life is. Now I am going to focus on the literary devices used by the poet. Please pay attention. I'll be putting forward some questions after I have explained to you. Right, friends? So let us find out the first literary device he has used. Just pay attention here. Fog comes. Oh. So the literary device used here is assonance. The literary device used here is assonance. Again, I would like you to have your focus here. Little cat feet. Little cat feet. And toe. Little cat feet. The literary device used here is consonants. Again, it, see, on little cat feet. On little cat feet. It creates an image also, and therefore it is imagery. The third literary device used by the poet is imagery. See, assonance is a literary device which is the repetition of vowels in the words which are placed close enough. Similarly, consonance is the literary device in which consonants are repeated in the words and the words are placed close enough. Whereas if the poet is able to create an image through his or her writing, then the literary device used is imagery. When the poet says, fog comes, normally people use such kind of sentences for human beings. So it is personification also. See, one sentence can have 2, 3 or 4 literary devices, right? So here he has also used personification. Right, friends? Fog comes and see, it sits looking over harbor and city on silent haunches and then moves on. The full stop is here. There are no commas or semicolons or full stop placed anywhere in between. So it is enjambment. Right? He has used one more literary device, that is enjambment. Right, friends? Read these lines again. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent haunches and then moves on. There is no comma, no full stop, no semicolon, and therefore the literary device here is also enjambment. There is one more literary device used here. See, he has used the words cat as well as fog for symbolism. In fact, he wants to focus on the life of human beings, and therefore the literary device used here is symbolism also. As symbolism, he uses the words cat and fog. Cat and fog words have been used for symbolism. So these are basically the literary devices which you find. One more literary device very evident. Can any one of you tell? Absolutely, it is metaphor. See, the fog comes on little cat feet. Metaphor is the direct comparison between two unlike things which have at least one thing in common, and that is what fog and cat have been compared here, but they have one thing in common, that is the coming. The coming of the fog has been compared to the arrival of the cat, and both their arrival is almost the same. The arrival of the fog is unnoticed. Similarly, the arrival of the cat goes unnoticed. So friends, having talked about these literary devices, I would suggest you to go through the poem once again. You must know the central idea of the poem. Although the poem is very small, yet it has an opening like any other poem. In the first two lines, the poet talks about the arrival of the fog. It comes like a cat arrives without being noticed. Then in the next two lines, he talks about a complete covering of the place wherever it comes. Similar is the case in both the cases. And it can be said about the life of a person also. He comes in the world and then it tries to dominate the world, and then one day silently he or she leaves the world. That is what both do. In the last two lines, their departure has been beautifully referred to here and without being noticed. I hope you enjoyed this session with me. Thanks for being good audience, good listener. Thanks a lot.